How you doing, Missy?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Governor Newsom?
Do you know what a detransitioner is? Do you know Chloe Cole, at the age of 15, she got her breast removed and now regrets it because of gender affirmative care?
How are you?
How about the Lodi woman? At 13, she got her breast removed. Gender affirmative care. No one stopped her. She was mentally unwell.
Yeah, I mean, I just had
You can't get a tattoo until you're 18. You can't date until you're 18. You can't go in a tanning salon. But young girls and young boys can get their body parts removed. Talk to me. Our duty. I'm an attorney. I send you letters. Thousands of people I represent. Kids who haven't been affirmed don't commit suicide.
Just a second. You're not that excited.
Kids commit suicide 19 times more after having their body parts removed.
Governor, parents have legitimate concerns about their kids being able to medically
Why
transition
don't
at
you
such a
talk
young
to us?
age. What do you have to say to those parents? What do you have to say?
Hello and welcome to Teaching Liberty. My name is Stephanie Edmonds, and in this episode, we're going to be talking with the person who's responsible for the video you just watched. No, not Gavin Newsom, although I would love to have a conversation with Gavin Newsom. So if you know him, let him know that Stephanie over at Teaching Liberty would love to sit down with him for an interview. But who we are going to have a conversation with in this episode is Max Bonilla. He is the young man who was following Gavin Newsom and asking him questions. The video, of course, went absolutely viral, and you know that I have an affection for people who throw cameras in the faces of powerful people. And indeed, it certainly reveals who they really are.
How you doing, Missy?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Governor Newsom?
He's better known on social media as Outraged Teen, and he describes himself as a Gen Z independent journalist. In our conversation, we discuss how long-term school closures in California sparked his advocacy, what motivates him to continue doing this work, what he's doing now as a college student, and more about his worldview and what he plans to do in the future. Before we get into it, though, help your girl out. Hit that like button. If you're new, welcome. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. I just hit 1,000 subscribers and I'm so appreciative of all the support from everybody out there. Let's keep it going. Make sure you share this out with your friends and on your social media and let everybody know what's going on here at Teaching Liberty. And of course, you can support my work directly by becoming a member of our community, the Free Thought Collective, over at TeachingLiberty.org. I'll have that linked in the description down below. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Max Bonilla. How's it going, Max? Thanks for joining me. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and why are you such an outraged teen?
So I am 18 years old, just turned 18, so became legal recently. I'm in my second year of college. We'll be going on to my third year in May. And when I got involved, I started my Instagram account and the first name was Open the Schools Now. And it's kind of funny because, you know, that name, I took on that name a few years ago. Like, I want to say it was late 2020. And the real reason was because I was tired, like how in my state, you know, kids were demanding the schools to be open back up. In fact, I would call myself a medical freedom activist because I believe that people should have had, especially children, the freedom of choice to, you know, be able to go to school if they wanted to. And they didn't have a choice for a long time because of wealthy political donors that our governor here in California, you know, was like, I would say, serving, just like being a lapdog for essentially, rather than the actual constituents of our state. So, I mean, I started that page up and then recently changed to Outraged Teen. The reason I'm the Outraged Teen is because I'm outraged by what's going on in my state, what's going on in my country. I think some things really need to change.
Well, I like to see that you are engaged. It seems like you're outraged, but you're trying to fuel that anger in a constructive direction. And
Right.
I actually am wearing my Schools Are Essential sweatshirt, hoodie that I made back in the beginning of 2021. It was like January 2021. New York City middle schools and high schools were closed with no plans to open. I was going crazy at home trying to figure out what to do. And I started the organization Teachers for Open Schools, and we made these hoodies. And so that was really also my path to activism, I would say, because I was a high school history teacher. I still firmly believe that you should separate activism and teaching. And I didn't feel I really had any reason to. Of course, there was different events going on in American history, but for sure, things have definitely changed vastly over the past 2.5, 3 years. And I think that we've waken up to the process and just how corrupt it is, particularly at the state level. I'm here in Connecticut, so we're not too far behind some of the things you guys are doing there in California. So so since the open schools stuff, what other issues have you been following? I see on your Instagram, I wouldn't call them rants. I mean, you definitely bring the facts, and you let people know how it is. I like that you don't hold it back. So just tell us a little bit more about the issues you're really following and what you do on social media.
Yeah, so initially, once the schools finally opened back up, I had an outdated name, but I was focusing on new issues. I was focusing on the jab mandates, the mask mandates, and things like that, because those were two primary things that were really affecting kids as they were getting back into school. And in some cases, even mandates for testing, depending on the district that kids were in. And in California, they came up with a set of 10 draconian bills that they wanted to impose last year, which involved testing kids for COVID-19, which actually was one of the bills that passed last year, by the way, the mandatory testing of kids for COVID-19, which will then go into effect, I want to say either 2024 or 2025. They're going to start testing kids for something that really isn't around anymore. And we had another bill that would silence doctors for having a different opinion on COVID than just like the general narrative. And obviously a court put a preliminary injunction on that. And
technically, I believe the preliminary injunction only applies to the named plaintiffs in the case. And it still definitely puts a chilling effect on speech for doctors. And that's AB 2098 in California.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then they proposed, there was another bill that I can recall that they proposed where they wanted like police officers to enforce public health orders, which they were like, well, if you don't want to enforce people staying inside or locked down or things like that, we're just going to defund your police department. That's what the state was essentially saying. And so what I was doing on Instagram was I was going and covering it because I thought these were really important issues that people needed to know about. Almost no one was paying attention, but once they saw this slate of 10 bad bills getting pushed, the media had no choice but to kind of start reporting on it, because a lot of people, even in my area, were disturbed. I was frankly disturbed. I was like, California is on a collision course with communist China. When is this going to stop? And I realized like everyone's always questioning, like, who's going to step up, who's going to do something about it. But normally the people asking that question are the most qualified people to do it, because the more they ask it, no one is actually going to step up. So you have no choice but to do it yourself.
And everybody is qualified to step up and speak. This is your life. This is your country. And I think that now is the time. So what do your parents think? I have to ask, because I'm 33 years old. I've been interested in politics for a long, long time. So they're no stranger to me asking questions and trying to have these types of conversations, but doing it on social media and the stand I've taken, they've definitely, are you sure you want to do this and that? So what is it? How have your parents been? Because when you started, you were 15, 16. So
yeah, just about like 15, just about to turn 16 pretty much is when I started. I was obviously awake before then. I was obviously seeing the narrative unfolding even before COVID. I had a very much a distrust for the media and for the feds and for all of it. But, you know, then
Where does that come from?
just,
Where does that come from? Like you're 15, 16 years old.
yeah, so I was always skeptical. You know, I like to question things, you know, in my young ages and my teens. And, you know, I like to do research on things. You know, I like to dig beyond, you know, what we were being told. I mean, obviously, you know, I think in 2019, we were told the economy was really good. Things were going well, you know, going into 2020, the pandemic. But I also have, I was not necessarily cynical, but I was definitely skeptical. And I was like, well, you know, there is a possibility that the economy wasn't doing well in 2019 and that this whole COVID thing was just a big mask for an economy that was about to crash, not necessarily because of one man in office, but because of what we've been doing over the years, right? We've been printing money out of thin air. We've been allowing banks to borrow it for practically for free. We've literally been artificially boosting the stock market with this money. I mean, you can just look at these basic things. And then we're also, you know, now we're increasing the interest rates. And if you look at like the Fed Reserve chair, I mean, the head of the Fed Reserve, Jeremy Powell, he even says that, like, you know, well, even though we're increasing the interest rates, that doesn't necessarily stop hyperinflation. And, you know, I was one of those people who saw the dollar being devalued as we spoke and how other countries are moving away from it. I mean, China already moved away from it before, you know, 2019. I mean, they were already starting to trade using their own currency, the yuan, and then they made their own digital yuan. And then now the Saudis won't even sell oil using for the dollar, you know, because the dollar was the world reserve currency. Like, we are a collapsing empire, you know. And so even before COVID, I saw that. And so it's like, you know, with COVID, the level of my trust in politicians and in the government was already at an all-time low. You know, it was just kind of simply like looking at things, understanding the reality and being awake. And it's like, from like the TV shows, predictive programming, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like when politicians say, don't panic, you should panic. And when they say panic, you shouldn't panic. You know, it's like you should always do the opposite of what they,
yeah.
And
well,
even
I think that's at least a starting place, right? Like I think that's actually how I got in the beginning, because in the beginning they were like, oh, go to Chinatown. And because it was right around the Chinese New Year. So New York City, they were like, go to Chinatown, go to the parade, like go see a movie. And I'm like, so right. I like did the opposite, but then I realized that that was actually too simple of a framework. Like, it was a good starting place, but I should have never called for like us to like lock down. That was crazy of me.
Right.
But,
So you asked what my parents think. I mean, obviously, you know, there are some things that, you know, they're very skeptical about in terms of my beliefs, but they're okay, obviously, with, you know, me doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm an adult now. And then obviously, you know, when I got into it, I still, you know, was able to make my own decisions. You know, I was obviously a kid that was growing up. And so, you know, I mean, who can really interfere with that? You know, but my mom started more seeing, like, you know, all the things that were going on as I kind of started like revealing like all the corruption, in particular, the dealings with pharma and the politicians were exposed way more than ever. I know before that you had like the 2008, 2010 liberals that were very opposed to the mandates, you know, or to any sort of pharma funding the government or pharma lobbying the government. But like, it was like right in our faces, this whole COVID thing. And people don't even realize it. You know, now the FDA has come down and said, you know, like, the COVID-19 vaccine is no longer authorized for use in the United States. They are literally backpedaling everything that they've done for the last 3 years because it's over. The national emergency is over, but they've literally kept us under spell for the last 3 years. And I've been trying to wake people up from it. And I think my parents started to see it. I think, you know, they've fallen back at certain points in terms of not understanding certain narratives and agendas that have been peddled. But I've definitely, you know, been there to try and help my family understand the things that are going on.
Yeah, I mean, and it can definitely be a lot, and you can definitely sound crazy.
I know.
Because like you said, when you're hearing something else over and over and over again out of the TV, everybody's talking about it. We've been normalized. Yeah, some of these things do sound crazy. But if you look at the numbers, if you follow the money, it more or less does pan out that way. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what I call this period is the veil of normalcy, because you know, everybody's back to the hustle and bustle of their family and their job or going to school. And, Yet bills are still moving faster than ever at the state level. A lot of the COVID era
Right.
framework and restrictions are still in place. Everything from the electronic vaccine passport systems that, even though like only New York City and some select cities put in place these systems, in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, we did like 3 state project on building a vaccine passport database system. So there's a lot of these things still here, and this is just kind of the lull. And I think people really still need to be plugged in. They need to be fortifying and defending. So what are some of the issues that you're tracking moving forward, or what are your plans? Like, I know you said you have 2 years of college left because you're might be a little bit of a whiz kid over here, whizzed your way through the last couple of years there. Maybe COVID helped you out with that, being able to do stuff online. But so you have 2 years of college left. Like, what are you looking at? What are you thinking about?
You know what? Going into the future, I think it's important to like teach people, help them realize that, you know, and here's the thing. People are living under the illusion that like, you know, we are now just as free as we were back in like March of 2020, right before the lockdowns. Life is good, you know, everything. We're not nearly as free as we were in March of 2020. And that's because as states imposed their state of emergencies, they were able to get a lot of draconian bills taking away our freedoms passed. And these are bills that will be encoded in law and applied and enforced for the years to come, whether or not COVID exists. Because what they're going to do is they're going to apply these to future viruses. In California, through the COVID state of emergency, they were able to get some bills through. One of them basically establishes a centralized immunization database where the state has access to people's, you know, jab status, you know, to see whether they're jabbed or not, or juiced or not. And it's just really unfortunate because they're not just going to use, their intention was never to use any of these bills that they passed just for COVID. It is for the future virus or whatever they have coming, the future
the next pandemic,
you know,
right?
The next pandemic, whatever they have coming, you know, it is exactly for that, you know, because if they have all the laws on the books, they're going to do whatever they can, you know, to keep us at bay by restricting any freedoms that we have. I mean, the 14th Amendment, right, allows us freedom of mobility. In fact, what I've been doing and what I've been doing for other people is to get them educated on the Constitution, you know, the supreme law of the land, why it's important to understand our rights, because the 14th Amendment says, hey, everyone has unrestricted mobility between state to state. And, you know, basically we can move around as we choose to. Freedom of mobility is a freedom, or is an inalienable right offered to us by the Constitution. So when they shut us down for a pandemic and they say, look, you know, you can't move because, you know, a bunch of people are going to get sick and die, and that's the narrative that they peddle, people get scared. The more scared they get, the more freedoms they're able to take away. And that's what I want people to understand, is that, you know, these things are essential to liberty. And the moment that we crush them, when things go back to normal, I mean, there will be no normal to go back to. Actually, I stand corrected there. I have Twitter, so I'm going on Twitter Spaces and talking with people about stuff like this. More people need to know the concept. You know, in schools, they're hardly teaching when I went up in school, you know, through the grade, you know, levels, I don't remember ever learning about the Constitution. Maybe we learned the preamble and that's about it.
Glossed right over it.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. You know, they may teach you in 8th grade to memorize the preamble to the Constitution, but that's the only thing they will teach you about the Constitution, likely, if that now, in the K through 12 system, because you have a lot of these teachers, I think, as you said, Stephanie, who mix their activism with their teaching, right? So they're trying to instill their ideology into children. And so obviously, I don't think, and now what they're trying to convince us is that things like reading the Constitution word for word in the class is a form of instilling ideology. There was no ideology behind that. In fact, I think that, you know, that King George III probably would have called that radical ideology, saying that, you know, we're really going to, this group of people is going to separate.
It's definitely up for debate. I mean, is it an ideology? Sure. I would say it is an ideology, but it's the one that our country is founded on. So we kind of agree that this is the one we want to teach our
Right.
children so that we can keep this country going.
Right.
So yeah, I think things get tricky. I definitely don't want to
Makes
just,
sense.
I think that if you're teaching American history, and this goes for any history, you need to be teaching the good, the bad, and the ugly. You need to be teaching all of it. You need to be teaching true history, right? So we're definitely lacking on that. And I think one of the biggest problems that I was experiencing as a teacher, I taught a little bit of US history, but I was mostly teaching global history. And my students' level of reading and reading comprehension was not proficient at a 10th grade level. And so it makes it really difficult to get to that part where you're talking about these ideas on a more high level and nuanced way. They say, oh, we want to have the critical thinking. Well, if you don't have a base of knowledge, it's really hard to think critically. And if you can't read and memorize to an extent, a set of facts for a certain period of time, it makes that stuff really hard. So there's definitely a lot of things to be said for our state of schools. I want to know, where do you do your research? Because you said you weren't getting a whole lot of it in school. So what are your go-to resources? Besides the Constitution, which I love.
That's a really good question. I mean, sometimes I'll do a quick search, if I want to know something about the 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment, I look it up. And, obviously you'll get some interpretations, but I kind of like to look at both sides of what, it says, what people are saying, essentially. I mean, where I mainly, get my, news from sort of is just directly, for especially new bills and new, possible laws that are being proposed, is Legiscan, which is a great site that literally has all the bills from any state, from anywhere, and you can read the bill text word for word. And I prefer that over some biased media narrative that's NBC saying that this is a bill that this bill that is mandating vaccines, right, is going to protect children, right? Where if I look at the bill, right, there's nothing saying that, oh, we're going to offer kids a philosophical or medical exemption, which, by the way, these are practically non-existent in California, which they've done everything they can to strip away our freedoms and to make sure that people don't have
same
any
in
choice.
Connecticut and New York, kids 18 and under do not have religious exemptions.
Right. And it doesn't make sense, because if we were as focused on educating kids as we were on making them wards of the state, we would not have this problem with literacy, right? Because you said that so many kids are going into the 10th grade and they can barely read. So obviously you don't have the support of the school. The school is not equipping the children to, I don't want to say children because, obviously now they're high schoolers, but
adolescents,
the kids to essentially be able to read and to be up to par. I was a 10th grader not that long ago, so maybe kids is not even appropriate, but essentially you have the teachers unions, right? And they're supposed to be advocating for teachers, and technically, sorry, I've got an alarm here. But technically, they're supposed to be helping you, right? Teachers like you, they're supposed to be giving you resources, and they should be doing everything they can to make sure that, your classroom is running smoothly, that you don't have, any sort of that there's not sort of unjust treatment on the part of your employer towards you, or some bias because of, your political beliefs or whatever that is. I mean, as long as you're obviously not pushing that on your class. But obviously the whole point of a union was to protect the employee, right, from unjust treatment, exploitation, et cetera, et cetera. But the union has become such a big political unit that they don't have your interest at heart or the kids' interest at heart. You're paying into it, right? But they don't have yours or the kids' interest.
Right.
They have their own interest, and their own interest was to keep the school shut down. And it did not matter how the kids were supposed to, perform. If I were a teachers union head, let's say, but I had good intentions, I wasn't intending to get political or anything, I would be doing everything, that I could to keep the schools open, to make sure that kids are learning, and my union would probably fight the other union from, keeping the schools closed, and but obviously they have one giant union here in California, which people are leaving in record numbers. I mean, I want to say in the last few years, 11,000 teachers in California have left the teachers unions, because these are the people that said, we want the police defunded, we want healthcare for all, and if we don't get our demands, we're going to keep the schools closed. Had nothing to do with safety, had nothing to do with COVID. And that possibly explains what has happened across the nation with teachers not wanting to work, is why over half of Americans can barely read past the third grade level.
Yeah, I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. I'm for sure evidence of unions not caring about their dues paying members. And I was wondering, speaking of jobs and things like that, what are you studying in college? Like, what are you looking to go out in the world and do?
I took interest in political science. One of the professors I have, he has, obviously his MA in psychology, and he was talking about, how obviously whatever your passions are, that's kind of what your major's, going to be aligned with. But he said something more specific than that, and I felt like it resonated with me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, when I got to school, that was to 13th grade technically, which is freshman year of college, I picked that major and decided to just kind of run with it. And so, I've been studying it, and I think I'm learning a lot more outside the classroom than inside the classroom. I've been learning a lot more by doing my own, research on things.
How do you find your classes to be overall, your college experience? I know there's definitely an idea that, oh my God, don't send your kid to college, they're going to come out woke. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like your classes are definitely framed in that way, or not?
I think I've had some, yeah, but I think that obviously if your kids aren't vigilant, their brains are going to be shot by the time they come out. They're going to be literal communists. I mean, because college, what it does right now is it teaches you how to be a good communist. You have, communist professors, and obviously, and it's weird because I think, they're putting emphasis like on things like CRT, which really started in colleges, and then it kind of went down to the high school level where they're teaching things like intersectionality, second shift. If you're a certain kind of skin color, then you can't ever amount to anything. The social construction of race. They're teaching all kinds of things that just are harming the minds of youth. And then by the time the young people go through the K through 12 system and then they go through college, they can't think for themselves anymore at that point, because they've already been told so much. And even if it's contrary to reality, I think it was interesting because it was Hitler who said that, if you tell people a lie enough, that they're eventually going to believe it. So,
yeah. All right. Well, I definitely look forward to hearing more from you. It looks like you're learning a lot from your own studies, and this is a great time for you to take advantage and definitely make sure you have those foundational values and principles down.
Right.
And like I said, I definitely look forward more. I definitely look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm very excited for what's coming.
Wow, barely 18 years old and doing such amazing and important work. Make sure you're following Max at Outrage Teen. I'll have it linked in the description down below, and support the work that he's doing as an independent journalist. I love that he goes straight to the source and he's not afraid to ask hard questions to people in power. And we definitely could use more of that. So leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of Max and the work he's doing. And of course, if you haven't, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and share this video out. Like I said, we just hit 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate all the support, and now let's keep it going. I'm really trying to do something different here at Teaching Liberty, not just go with the headlines and go with what's trending, but really go right to the source and talk to the people who are really on the ground doing the work. And to support my work directly so I can make more content like this, you can become a member of our community over at TeachingLiberty.org. I'll have that linked in the description down below. And until next time, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.
Come on.